Rain hammered against the tall windows of the Carter family estate, each drop echoing like tiny funeral bells for a life that once was. Inside, where creditors had stripped the walls bare and even removed the old family portraits, Emily Carter stood with her hands clasped, resembling a living portrait of quiet devastation. At 24, she had imagined a different life, one full of choices, love, freedom. Instead, she faced a world of debt, loss, and unyielding expectations. Across the long, scarred mahogany table stood Nathan Miller, a man whose wealth was whispered about in every corner of New York and beyond. Tall, dark-haired, with storm-colored eyes, he possessed the kind of dangerous allure that drew both fascination and fear. He didn't remove his gloves as if afraid to touch the I need a wife. Nathan said, his voice cold and precise, clipped like a legal contract. You need protection from financial ruin and public scandal. The agreement is, she swallowed hard, her pulse racing as he continued. You will carry my name, manage my estate, and enjoy financial security. In return, I ask only your discretion and attendance at the events that require it. His words were blunt, but Emily held her composure. She dared to ask, in the other aspects, marriage, my personal life. Nathan's jaw tightened under pale skin. A muscle twitched. I will never touch you. You will have your own rooms, your own life. In time, and air may be necessary, but it can be arranged in other ways or not at all. The cruelty in his tone, born of grief, left her breathless. Yet Emily understood that pain often wears the mask of indifference. She had heard whispers about his first wife, Claire, who died 3 years ago, and about Nathan locked in the fortress of his grief ever since. She nodded slowly. I agree, she whispered, her words as sealing a fate neither of them fully grasped. Outside, the rain continued its funeral dirge, and neither noticed the trembling hands, his hidden in gloves, hers buried in the folds of her worn black dress. Weeks passed, and Emily arrived at St. Andrew's Chapel, dressed in ivory silk borrowed from Nathan's extensive collection, a gown that had likely once belonged to Claire. She shivered as the fabric brushed her skin, a reminder that much of her new life was built from the remnants of another. Nathan stood beside her, a statue carved from marble, his expression unreadable. When the officiant called for him to take her hand, he did so without removing the gloves. The leather barrier felt like a wall between two warring nations. The chapel was packed as befits the wedding of a billionaire, yet the whispers were unmistakable. Poor girl, muttered one woman behind a lace fan. A marriage of convenience, added another. They say he keeps the rooms his first wife slept in locked. A tomb for the living. Emily heard everything, felt the weight of pity and curiosity pressing down, but did not flinch. She had spent the last months learning that people build walls around their pain, and the higher the wall, the deeper the wound it conceals. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan did not kiss her. He only inclined his head slightly, an almost imperceptible acknowledgement. Yet Emily saw it, the brief flicker in his storm-gray eyes. He was not indifferent. He felt too much and feared those feelings would destroy him. And somehow she understood that too, as her chest tightened with a mix of pity and curiosity. At Millerton Estate, they arrived in separate carriages. Mrs. Johnson, Nathan's loyal house manager, escorted Emily through the endless corridors to the east wing, a secluded world within itself. Your rooms receive the morning light, she explained, her tone neutral. Emily looked out over the unfamiliar gardens, realizing she had married a man haunted by ghosts and inherited a beautiful prison where she would become a specter in her own right. Days blurred into weeks. Emily wandered the dark, echoing halls, discovering the library, its leather-bound books cracked and aged, the music room with its dusty piano, and the overgrown Millennium Garden, once vibrant, now suffocated by neglect. Nathan moved through the house like a shadow, visible yet untouchable. She observed his solitary routines at early morning walks across the estate, with hands clasped behind his back, the solitary hours at his desk, poring over ledgers and correspondence late into the night. Occasionally, a few words passed between them. A good morning, a thank you, whispered for arranging a modest pension for her mother. Mostly there was silence. Then one chilly autumn afternoon, Emily found the Millennium Garden and began clearing the dead growth, pruning, coaxing life back into the overgrown beds. Nathan watched from a distance, unseen, his chest tightening as he witnessed her patience, resilience, and quiet command over the estate. Little did Emily know this garden had been Claire's sanctuary. The sight of Emily breathing life back into it stirred emotions Nathan had buried, deep emotions he had convinced himself would never be permitted again. Inside the house, Emily found refuge in the library, curling up with poetry as the soft autumn light fell across the pages. She had learned to respect Nathan's space, avoiding his favorite philosophy and business tomes, instead immersing herself in forgotten volumes tucked away in corners. One day he appeared at the doorway, silent, imposing, yet offering her the freedom to read anything she pleased. "The library is as much yours as mine," he said, his tone formal but not unkind. Their interactions were formal, restrained, but Emily noticed subtle changes, the careful adjustments of tea to match his preferences, the placement of fresh flowers, small gestures that gradually broke through Nathan's wall of grief. Though he would never touch her, never fully allow intimacy, a quiet bond was forming. She understood that patience, observation, and courage were slowly reshaping the fortress he had built around himself. Emily's first weeks at Millerton Estate were a careful dance of observation, endurance, and quiet rebellion against the emptiness around her. The mansion, the garden, the library, they became her domain, her sanctuary. Nathan remained a distant, enigmatic figure, but even in his absence, he loomed large in her life, a man who feared love, yet could not escape its pull. And Emily, determined and brave, was already beginning to change the rules of this strange, arranged existence. Winter crept across Millerton Estate like a quiet, watchful animal, softening the gardens Emily had worked so hard to revive, and casting long shadows through the endless hallways. Days passed in gentle routines that neither she nor Nathan acknowledged out loud, but both silently participated in. She arranged flowers in the morning room. He appeared there 5 minutes later, pretending it was coincidence. She walked through the garden paths at dusk. He started choosing that exact time for his solitary rounds. And though no words were spoken about it, both of them knew the patterns were forming because something inside the walls of the estate was shifting. One evening after the first light snowfall, Emily sat alone in the library, curled up with a leather-bound collection of American poets. She sensed him before she heard him, the faint shift of weight in the doorway, the restrained breath of someone deciding whether to enter or retreat. When she finally lifted her eyes, Nathan stood there, tie-loosened hands clasped behind his back, as if even now he was containing something dangerous inside himself. "I didn't mean to disturb you," he murmured. "You're not disturbing me," she replied, closing the book gently. "I was just reading." His eyes flicked to the cover. Frost. You know his work? A faint smile touched his lips. Every New England boy grows up under Frost's shadow. There was a softness in his voice she had never heard before, something unguarded, something almost warm, and just as quickly as it appeared, it vanished behind the elegant line of his jaw. "If you prefer solitude, I can leave," he added. Emily held his gaze. "No, stay. Please." He hesitated, then stepped inside, choosing a chair across from her, but angled slightly as though he needed one more degree of separation to breathe. They sat together in a silence that was somehow not empty. For the first time, Emily felt the room expand instead of shrink, as if the library itself approved of their quiet companionship. Gradually, their evenings followed this pattern. Nathan would appear sometimes with books, sometimes with estate ledgers. Emily began brewing the exact blend of tea he liked, Assam, in the morning salon in the afternoon. He never thanked her directly, but she saw it in the way he paused before drinking, the way his shoulders eased just slightly, as if her small acts of kindness soothed old wounds he didn't yet know how to reveal. Then came the night Emily found the Millennium Garden completely blanketed in frost, the roses she had saved now bending under the weight of winter. It stung her more than she expected, seeing nature undo the labor she had poured herself into, but she carried pruning shears anyway, determined to salvage whatever she could. She didn't hear Nathan at first. He moved like he always did, quiet as a thought, stopping only when he stood a few feet away. "You're out here late," he said. "So are you." He looked at the frozen petals, his breath forming pale clouds in the cold air. The roses were Claire's favorite. Emily froze. He rarely spoke of his first wife. She turned her gaze toward him, waiting. "She loved this garden," he continued, voice low. "She said it was the only place that felt alive, even when the world wasn't." Emily understood then why he had stayed away, Why he had watched from windows instead of stepping inside the garden? It wasn't indifference, it was mourning. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Nathan shook his head. "Don't be. You've brought it back. You've brought things back I didn't expect." The words lingered in the air warmer than the winter wind. But he looked away quickly as though afraid to let them rest too long. "Come inside," he said softly. "You'll freeze out here." Emily followed him back into the house, feeling the thinnest thread of connection, fragile, trembling, but finally visible. The next morning, she walked the tenant path beyond the estate gates, wanting to understand the people who relied on Millerton for their livelihood. What she saw pulled at her heart: leaking roofs, thin children, fields untended, because no one could afford seed for spring planting. She returned to the estate with a weight on her chest and found Nathan in the corridor outside the dining room. "We need to talk," she said with a steadiness that surprised even her. His brow rose. "About what?" "The tenant families. They're struggling, truly struggling. The Johnsons need repairs before the snow worsens, and the Mitchell children are coughing from damp walls. The Westfields lie empty because they lack seed money." "If we don't act now, Emily," he interrupted gently, though his voice carried a warning edge. "I handle estate matters. This isn't your burden." She stepped closer. "But I've managed estates before. My father's failures forced me to learn more than a daughter should have to. I know how to fix this, and whether you acknowledge it or not, I am part of Millerton now." He looked at her, then really looked. Not as a contractual wife, not as a polite obligation, but as a woman standing firm in the doorway of a life she refused to be sidelined in. "What do you propose?" he asked quietly. Emily handed him a folded sheet of paper. "Repairs, medicine, microloans for seeds." Costs were listed with precision. The plan was simple, logical, and compassionate. Nathan read it silently, slowly, and then something shifted in his expression. Respect, surprise, maybe even the first crack in the armor he wore like a second skin. "Very well," he said at last. "Give the orders." "And Emily?" She looked up. "You were right to bring this to me." For the first time since they met, she saw gratitude in his eyes. Unmasked, unfiltered, real. From that moment on, something new began. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was possibility. And possibility, Emily realized, could be just as dangerous and just as thrilling. She should have expected that hearts built on grief and fear don't open easily. She should have expected the tension, the glances, the moments when Nathan seemed on the verge of reaching for her, before pulling back as if burned. Yet she couldn't help the truth rising inside her. She was falling for him, for the man he hid behind the polished exterior, behind the gloves, behind the silence. And the danger of that truth, she feared, was only beginning. As snow gathered on the estate rooftops, Emily felt it change, coming like a storm on the horizon. Beautiful, terrifying, inevitable. "Tell me, do you feel Emily is getting closer to Nathan in a real way? Or is she risking heartbreak by stepping into his world?" Winter tightened its grip around Millerton Estate until the whole world seemed suspended between breath and silence. Emily felt it in the air, the quiet before something breaks. And in the days that followed, she saw it in Nathan too. Whenever she entered a room, he would straighten as if pulled toward her by instinct. Yet the moment their eyes met, he would retreat behind the practiced stillness he'd perfected over years of grief. She wondered how much longer they could go on like this, orbiting each other without daring to collide. One night as she wandered past his office, she heard voices, Nathan's and his sister Claire's. Emily hesitated only a moment before she recognized the tightness in his tone, the kind that signaled something painful was being unearthed. "She looks at you with hope," Claire whispered sharply, "and you let her believe in something you refuse to offer." "I don't refuse," Nathan answered, his voice strained. "I'm incapable. Loving nearly destroyed me once. I won't survive that again." Emily didn't stay to hear more. Those words were enough to slice something inside her cleanly in two. She fled down the hall, her breath breaking in the stillness, her heart pounding like a warning bell. She had known he kept his distance. She had sensed the fears beneath his composure. But hearing him say it, he couldn't love her, was a different kind of wound. The next morning when he appeared at breakfast, she could hardly meet his eyes. Nathan noticed instantly, of course. He watched her with the uneasy expression of a man who knows a fire is burning somewhere, but cannot yet smell the smoke. Before either could address it, the storm arrived. Not a metaphor, not a glimpse of tension, but a true violent winter storm unlike anything the estate had seen in years. Winds howled against the mansion like wolves. Snow lashed against the windows in blinding sheets. Millerton's power flickered, then died, leaving the mansion lit only by firelight and breathless anticipation. While the staff rushed to secure the property, Nathan was already pulling on his heavy coat. "The tenant houses," he said, "they're too exposed. If the creek overflows, the children won't make it through the night." "Then let me come with you," Emily said immediately. No, his refusal cut through the air like cold steel. "I won't risk you, but you'll risk yourself." He froze, breathing hard. For the first time, she saw fear in him, not for himself, but for her. "Emily," he whispered, "I have already lost one woman I loved. I cannot—" But he couldn't finish. The crack in his voice said enough. He left before she could stop him. The door slammed open into the screaming wind, then closed again, swallowing Nathan in the storm's black mouth. Hours passed. No one saw him return. And then his horse came back without him. Saddle torn, eyes wild, foam frozen along its mane. Emily didn't think, didn't hesitate. She grabbed a cloak, a lantern, boots too big for her, and bolted into the night. The storm struck her instantly, a wall of ice and fury. But she pushed forward, heart-hammering one name again and again, Nathan, Nathan, Nathan. When she reached the creek, she saw it had overflowed into a raging river, and there beside a fallen tree, partly submerged in snow, she found him. Nathan lay trapped beneath a massive branch face, pale clothes soaked through breath, shallow as the whisper of a dying prayer. "No," she gasped, dropping to her knees. "No, no. Nathan, stay with me." Her lantern flickered. The world seemed to shrink around her until there was only her, the storm, and the man she refused to lose. She braced her feet in the mud, wrapped her torn hands around the branch, and pulled with everything grief and love had ever carved into her. Inch by inch it shifted. Every muscle burned. Every breath felt like swallowing fire. But she didn't stop. When she finally freed him, she dragged him, half carrying, half collapsing, toward the old gardener's cabin on the hill. She didn't feel the pain in her hands until she saw blood staining the snow. She didn't feel the cold until she laid Nathan beside the dying hearth. All she felt was terror that she might lose him, and the fierce certainty she would not. Through the long night, she nursed him, warming him, binding his wounds, calling him back whenever he drifted toward the darkness. And somewhere between exhaustion and despair, he whispered her name. "Emily, don't go." She took his hand, holding it against her heart. "I'm right here. I won't leave you. Not ever." When dawn finally broke, pale and trembling, Nathan woke fully. He saw her slumped beside him, her hands bandaged, her face streaked with soot, her eyes exhausted but alive, and something in him shattered cleanly, beautifully. "You saved me," he whispered. "Yes," she said softly, "because losing you was the one thing I couldn't survive." His hand trembled as he reached for her cheek. "Emily, I tried so hard not to love you." His voice cracked. "But I do. I love you so much it terrifies me." She felt tears rise warm against the cold of dawn. "Then stop running. Choose me. Choose us." He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her shoulder, and breathed, "I choose you. Today and every day after." Returning to Millerton Estate was like returning from the edge of a different world. The staff cried openly when they saw Nathan alive. Claire embraced Emily and whispered, voice trembling, "Thank you for giving me my brother back." Weeks passed. Nathan healed. Emily healed. And something else healed too. The hollow rooms, the cold corridors, the silence that once rested like dust over the house. Laughter returned. Warmth returned. They returned to each other. Spring brought life back into the Millennium Garden. Roses bloomed under Emily's careful hands, and Nathan stood beside her, no gloves, no walls, only a man finally brave enough to build a life instead of a prison. When Emily discovered she was expecting, fear flickered through Nathan like a shadow, but it passed, replaced with a fierce, trembling hope. Together they prepared for their daughter's arrival, and when she was born, red-faced and furious at the world, Nathan wept openly, holding her, as if she were the first sunrise he had ever seen. "Her name is Hope," he whispered, tears falling onto the soft blanket. Because that's what you gave me. Years later, as three little girls danced among the roses, Hope, Grace, and Violet Emily leaned into Nathan on the garden bench. He wrapped his arm around her, pressing a kiss to her hair. "Remember when I said I'd never touch you?" he asked with a quiet laugh. Emily smiled up at him. "You were a fool." "Yes," he said, pulling her closer. "But I'm your fool." And in the golden light of that peaceful afternoon, with their daughter's laughter filling the air and the roses blooming as if blessing the life they built, they knew this truth: love had not come easily, but it had come fully. It had destroyed the walls, survived the storm, and rewritten their future. Tell me, dear viewer, do you believe Emily and Nathan truly earned their happy ending after everything they fought through? If this story touched your heart, comment 100 below to let me know you want more emotional stories like this. And tell me, from which country are you watching this story? I would love to greet you where you are. If their journey moved you, please share this video so more people can feel this story the way you just did.